AccessTV.org, grassroots social media television.
AccessTV.org. Your family, your friends, we are where you are.
Welcome to another series of Education One. This week we're supposed to have actually had Lieutenant Governor Nancy Wyman. Something that apparently came up the last minute. She's rescheduling for another time in our second session, our second series within April. But I'd like to read an article that I got out of West Hartford on February 20th. It says Malloy Wyman to host community forums. And what they're going to be talking about is pretty much education. So I guess when they do the tour, the first event is going to be held in Norwalk sometime this week. And then they're going to be actually going through the state. So by the time she gets back touring around the state, talking about education and some other things, we're going to probably have some additional questions of how that went. But this week, in a place of Nancy Wyman, we have a gentleman that's actually a consultant, a board member, actually assistant to Education One. His name is Dale Gustafson. He's been with me for quite a while. He is actually one of the pioneers, other than Pastor Apostle Wade Lanier that passed away in 2011. And we're going to look at education. That's basically our main focus of how MC Square in New England Talent Search actually started. Welcome to the show, Mr. Dale.
Thank you, Sam. It's always a pleasure, and I don't think in any way I can replace Nancy Wyman.
Right.
But we are going to talk about education, and
right.
And because I deal at least somewhat with statistics, I'm going to try to put some sort of a purview on what's happening in Connecticut as it relates to what's been happening nationally.
Right.
If that's okay with you.
Right. We're looking at Connecticut. Out of the top 50 states a few years ago, we was ranked at the bottom.
Yeah.
We was ranked at the bottom. And then a year and a half ago, we had the Department of Education, Mr. Duncan, come in. And we sort of grandfathered Connecticut in so they can receive funding because we was doing that poorly with their math, science, and reading.
Yes, that is right. There were several requests for funding, if I recall correctly.
Right, and we never got it.
And none came through.
Right.
But there are some now,
some?
finally,
Right.
that are making it in. I thought, from my perspective, I would like to begin with a little bit of graduation rate history. And this was news to me. I found this in Education Week and a couple responses to the article.
Okay.
In August of 2013, the Education Week article. Mm-hmm. And it was talking about the fact that, and the responses to it, that in 1910, over 100 years ago,
right,
a graduation rate in this country was about 10%.
Is that right?
That was it, 10%.
Right.
And of course, we know that the Industrial Revolution and all that was starting during those days.
Right.
So people basically went from home to work.
Right.
Very little in the way of education. By 1920, during and just after World War I, that graduation rate had increased to about 20%.
Okay.
And then by the beginning of World War II, late 30s, early 40s,
right,
it was up to about 50% at that point in time. And then by the time 1960 came, which is more the time that I start to remember because of my own age, the graduation rate had started to get above or right around 75%.
Okay.
Now, since the 60s, it hasn't varied very much. It's some years it's gone down, some years it's gone up, but approximately 75% has been the average. Most recently, for national figures, that it takes a long time to pull those all together. But the most recent national figures that I have were from 2010.
Okay.
2010 to 2011.
Okay.
And that figure, I want to quote it right, was 78.2%.
That's national.
That's national. And at approximately that same time, it's not an equal ratio, but the next year, Connecticut, in its own right, had a graduation rate of 82.7. So during we're talking about 5 years ago now, approximately, Connecticut at that point at least was approximately 4 percentage points above the national average.
Okay.
And since that time, that 82.7 was actually in the Connecticut year 2010 to 2011. The next year that I have records for, which was 2011-2012, the rate had gone up to 84%.
Well, let me ask you a question now. Is that as a whole, or that's breaking down minority status?
This is the total average, and I have some statistics about breaking things down a little bit later as I go through this.
Okay.
But this is the total. All graduates
Right.
in Connecticut, 2012 now is at 84.8%, which again is approximately 4 to 5% percentage points higher than the national average. The national average was total as well.
Okay.
But it does show, and this I think is the increase in the fact that educational knowledge is important.
Right.
As the whole technology age has been moving along, more and more people need more and more education.
Right.
But interestingly enough, and this is where the ethnic differences come into place, most of the really high graduation rates are in those communities nationwide and in Connecticut, which are essentially white communities and affluent communities. And now I say essentially, that doesn't mean they don't have some minorities, but the overall percentage of the population within these communities is white and generally affluent. And those particular communities start having graduation rates that are 95%, 97%, 98%. Now, we're talking about an average that is in the 80s, which means what? It means that there are a lot of minority groups that are much lower than the average. And that, in fact, is true.
This is something, how time has actually, to me, stand at a standstill. We pump billions of dollars through Chef O'Neill and all these different entities through legal ramifications and all this, Oregon and all this stuff on at the LOB building, legislative building, or whatever building is in the United States. But apparently, the blacks or the Latinos or the American Indians to this day still not go forward. Some can, but most can't. If you look on the res, and believe me, I know about the res because of my family, we're still lacking. And we're the first people on the planet and still can't get what we have to be.
Yeah.
And it's a sad thing because, when I look at, funding out there, only Obama was the only one that gave the Native Americans $3.5 or $3.7 billion, and he still had to go through some problems of putting the money to the American Indians. Not Clinton, not George, not Bush, not Clinton, not the other presidents have done it other than Obama.
Right.
Now, why should it be on the shoulders of President Obama to do all these things? He only has like a year and a half left.
Exactly.
Which is this is crazy. I mean, the way the American system is a skill of other countries. You look at Finland, you look at Iceland, you look at South Korea, you look at all these countries that actually is below United States in wealth, and these people are very successful.
And they're doing better.
They're doing better.
Especially in their educational ventures,
Exactly.
it appears.
Exactly.
I mean, the U.S. is slowly dropping. We hear the number, they're 25th in math, and they're 30th in science.
Right.
And we used to be near
Number-
the top,
number- yeah,
if
number
not
one.
the top.
Right, in the top 5.
Yeah. And of course, when we talk about ethnic groups too, we're talking about those that are really a kind of native to the United States.
Right.
Because if we're talking about some of the Asian ethnic groups that
right.
are coming in here,
right.
and we look at our graduating classes almost in any community,
right.
oftentimes the very top students are the Asians.
And Connecticut is actually, to me, is sort of went backwards in hiring, and especially this is one of the reasons why manufacturing is what it is. You know, you have the insurance companies that actually pretty much hire mostly Indian people or from that area. You have another part of maybe technology or whatever that you have actually the Asian folks. And then you have everybody in between that actually is thriving here. But the job situation have actually went stagnant. Matter of fact, I think below stagnant towards the people that is here. Hartford was a town that, you know, if you didn't like something, you could actually be retrained or put into a situation and put your 20, 30 years in. It's not like that anymore.
Yeah.
They're actually rather hire people from the outside that, hey, we give you $1. We may not pay you the benefits, but we give you $1. And I'm not saying that, hey, not to hire these people, but what about the folks that have been living here and born here? That is the $64,000 question that people have been fighting for a number of years.
Your message might have gotten to some local people, because I was at a board meeting of
right.
the Hartford School Board last night.
Right.
And one of the topics that came up, which they apparently are working on now,
right.
is a way in which the Connecticut Works people
right.
and others who are here,
right.
corporate people,
right.
are trying now specifically to work with high schools, not only trade schools, but high schools and employers, to find ways in which the students who are normal, regular students of the schools can have opportunities to get into what they might call apprenticeships and internships.
How long
which,
we've been talking?
Which you've been talking about for 10 years.
For 10 years.
And more.
So, you know, I mean.
Exactly.
But now is the right time because they know where the money's at. It's like building a part, but it's advanced, but we have an old part right here that we need to make money on until we bring the other one in.
Yeah.
And that's a lot obsolete.
That turns out, I believe, to be also some federal dollars that were put into this because of Hartford's application for it. I mean, they put in other applications,
right.
but this was one that finally hit the,
right.
the jackpot,
right.
and they are being funded toward this.
Right.
So that's, in a sense, a local success story.
Right.
But it's not fully completed yet, and many were talking about the complications of putting all this together. It's going to take time. Yeah. But at least they're working on it.
They're working on it, and you know what is actually the short solution to the long solution, because it may take 5 years, but you already lost part of a generation.
Oh, yeah.
So that generation may end up in jail. You don't know what's going to happen. They may move. So we lose a handful of many people that actually could have been a success story within our own town.
Tied in with this was another interesting statistic that I found, which stated that of those individuals from Connecticut high schools that graduate, if they then take a post-graduation test, an advanced placement test, once they've graduated, and the aspect, there must be several kinds of advanced placement tests, but they were talking about just one individual passing one of those tests. It was over the last couple of years, this past year when they were doing it, the percentage of graduates that took that test and then passed it was 20%.
Out of how many people?
Out of those who took the. Now, I'm not saying that every graduate took the test.
This was statewide?
This was statewide.
So 20%?
20% take an advanced placement test after they've graduated.
Right.
20% don't pass it. I can't tell you that all graduates take an advanced placement test. They do not. But of those that did,
right,
only 20% passed.
So you have over 500,000 kids in the state of Connecticut going to school. Pretty much how we looked at it.
Yeah, that's correct.
So we have
At the high school
we have
levels.
169 towns. So we have about close to 300 high schools.
That's correct.
So if we have parochial whatever, and we have 20% that actually out of all these kids, we're in trouble.
Yeah.
We're in trouble. We're in trouble.
I mean,
big time.
it's saying something about the type of education that they're receiving.
Right.
That once they graduate and if they take this test, only 20% or less are passing it. Which then brings us to the next issue, which was the fact that our community colleges, I could read you something, if you don't mind. There's something from the state of Connecticut.
What we're going to end up doing, we're going to actually take a break. I want you to hold on to that.
Okay.
Because I have to pay some bills and stuff. We'll be right back
Okay.
to pick up some more information on the state of Connecticut, where we are with our kids, where we're going, what we're trying to actually solve here, and let the viewers know exactly what we're faced with the near future. We'll be right back. Thank you.
At Hartford Public Schools, we care about one thing above all, the future of our kids. That's why we're dedicated to providing all students with the knowledge and skills needed in the new global culture. Hartford Public Schools is thriving. More student success stories, more world-class facilities, more university and corporate partnerships, more amazing talent coming and staying in Hartford. This is how education is supposed to work. Welcome to Hartford Public Schools, where the future is present.
Welcome back to Education One. We're talking about facts and figures of actually the educational system in Connecticut. We're looking at Connecticut as a whole compared to Connecticut. So we're looking at the whole entire United States compared to Connecticut, how the graduation rate is, how the job title is. We're looking at the whole ramification. And these are the questions that when we have the lieutenant governor on or the governor on, these are questions that we need to ask our elected officials how this thing can come to pass to get our state where it has to be. Not so much the capital of actually Hartford, but we have 169 towns that we need to really look at. And right now, about 5 to 7 years ago, we had about 14 to 15 towns are struggling. It's well over 30 now. Even some of the affluent towns are struggling in education. Yeah. Thanks for coming. Thanks for being here today, Mr. Dale, because this is a question that MC Square and Net's been battling for a number of years. How my mother and Pastor Lanier actually asked me to try to pave the way on this. And every time that we're trying to actually do something, there's always, it's like a monkey wrench that actually gets thrown into it, and we take a step back. We have 2 steps forward, 100 steps back. So what's going on with the graduation rate and this stuff right here?
Well, again, just to review just briefly, Connecticut stands now in terms of the national graduation rate averages above average.
Right.
We're at about 85% in round figures.
Okay.
The national rate is probably no higher than 78 or 79%, something like that.
Right.
So if we look at the averages,
right,
we would say, well, Connecticut is doing all right. Right. It's been getting better. It may not go any higher. But then the issue becomes, what then happens with those who do graduate?
Right.
Can they go on to higher education?
Right.
Can they work it out in a community college or a 4-year school or whatever?
Right.
How do they fare?
Right.
Which has to do something again with what they're retaining.
Right.
Along with their certificate of graduation, their diploma. Well, in 2012, Connecticut, the legislature passed a public act, 1240. And this was one of the preambles to it. In 2012, a law was passed directing public community colleges and state universities to reconfigure how remedial developmental education is delivered. To the state colleges, they're asking them to reconfigure how remedial work is done, which means there's a problem, with the students who are coming to them, right? And here's a couple of the things that it says, why this remediation is really needed. Nearly 65% of students entering community colleges, the 2-year schools, and 20% of the students entering state universities and colleges of the 4-year variety are placed into remedial and developmental math or English courses. Those are 2 real areas that you've concentrated on in the after school forever.
It's a thing that when you talk to these people that is in power, are they really listening?
Yeah.
Now it takes twice as much money to train a child, not from the 5th grade. Now we're a freshman in college.
Exactly.
So my whole thing is there's something went wrong in the middle. So we're looking at, we pick up people between 1.99 and 2.5 that are struggling. Our kids, the 224 kids that came through MC Squared, they're above 3.0 now. They have their own business. They're going to law school. But the thing about it is, these are the kids that they call them the invisible kids now. We call them the kids on the bubble.
The kids on the bubble.
There's so many different names for this. But the thing about it is, now we have kids that now are between, say, 19 and 22 that seem like they can't even go anywhere. So by the time they do the remedial, you're talking about a 5-year program right now. It has to be.
That's right.
It can't be 4 years.
No.
Because, 1, it takes money. Number 2, how much scholarships they're going to give out. And number 3, you know, when you get into the summertime, all teachers are not around, not all professors. So now you start looking at how much tutoring can you put out there. If the Governor Rowland and actually Governor Malloy have actually listened to MC Square and some other people, they'd be out to deep sea right now. But since we're not actually, quote unquote, politically savvied or politically powerful, this is something now is faced with the state that they have to pump out more money. Where are they going to get the money from? Chef O'Neill?
Well, that is a question.
And that's not under Chef O'Neill's guidelines.
No, right.
You know, we're talking about integration of schools.
Yep.
So we have now people from West Hartford and Farmington don't want to go to the schools in the North End. If it's in the North End, they're not going. I've heard that a million times already. If it's not a certain school or the metropolitan school, the breakthrough school, a pathway, a magnet school, which in the West End or the East End of Hartford, we can go. North End, we're not going. 2, Matt Weaver. Is Weaver really going to get up? I hear that they have the money for Weaver. They're going to break ground, but that's actually an albatross right now.
Yeah.
That's like the Show Me state from Missouri. Show me if it's really going to be built. And last but not least, we have a system here in Hartford that, or the mindset is mind-boggling. It's this town is really, Hartford is like the capital is like, I don't know where it's from.
There seems to be some movement to break that mindset apart. There are some, I don't want to call them experimental programs, but some new programs. You mentioned the South and West End.
Right.
There are some new programs going on in some of these Hartford schools that are trying to integrate much more effectively online stuff into their normal coursework.
Right.
They're doing this also with special government money. And they're trying to also work within a district fashion, which doesn't mean that it's just Hartford all by itself, but it's trying to work with some of the outlying neighboring communities that are close in, our suburban areas. Not all of them, some of them, you know. But here, I want to get back to what the state thing says. Common methods of remedial education are not successful with a majority of students. Only 8% of community college students who take the remedial courses currently given go on to graduate.
Where's this information come from?
Right from Connecticut Public Act, right in the act itself, right off the internet. You can find it off the internet.
So, but how many people do you think really knows about this?
I'm not sure. You have to be someone who listens to what's going on in state government to know anything about this.
Right. So you have to actually, you really have to actually go to the legislative and go to these meetings.
You have to be there
because it's not going to be public information.
Yeah. I mean, some of these programs do have public hearings before they're passed because they want to have input, and you know that legislators ask for public hearings.
Right.
But then you're getting. And it doesn't take all the citizens to be behind it. It takes a few people who are interested in saying, hey, we got to make some change to this. But that's an astonishing figure. Once some remedial work has been done, only 8% really continue on with their education and get their degree.
So you're looking back that before they got to college, they've been struggling since elementary school.
They've been struggling all along.
They've been struggling all along.
Yeah.
So
they've been passed along.
They passed along
because of social whatever.
So the thing about it is, even though we have all this money to train teachers in whatever it is, the crazy part about the whole thing is that how can we actually train teachers in that field, and these teachers know good and well that these kids is not going anywhere?
Yeah.
Because we have to do the quota system. X number of kids have to pass a class for the instructor or the teacher to keep their tenure of where they're at. If not, they're gone. It's just so much laws and guidelines that now you have a gun to the teacher's head and says, well, you know something? I better pass these two right here. Even though I know they're going to make it, they just run a bubble. Let's move them along. I could get my little couple of dollars and stay in here, and I do my little 10 years, and I'm good.
Here's where some of the ethnic things come in, written in the state law. I mean, as background to it.
Right.
African American, Hispanic, and low-income students are disproportionately enrolled in remedial and developmental courses. 72% of African Americans, 70% of Hispanic, 71% of low-income students are in these remedial courses at the college level.
At the college
level. At the college level. Compared to, now there are white students too.
Right.
Compared to 56% of white students. And 29% for non-low-income students. So affluence seems to have a real effect on who gets involved in the need for remedial courses at the college level.
So we have about over 12% plus that actually is doing well.
Yeah.
And that could be black, white, green, or red. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't say, but it's about 12% that's actually what would do well in actually going their master's or PhD program.
Well, actually, I think in terms, if we're talking about non-low income students,
right,
that group itself, 70% are doing all right.
Okay.
But it's so skewed by all these other, the low income and the other ethnic groups, that it brings that average way down.
Right, under 20%.
Yeah.
That's phenomenal. And what year is this?
This was from the year 2012. Just
last year.
Yeah.
Just a couple.
I mean, we're now in the legislative year 2013.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. 2013, 2014.
Right, because it takes a while for each year.
That's correct. We're just 18 months ago, let's say.
Right.
This law went into effect. So, and then they have all kinds, which I'm not going to go into because, but they have all kinds of formulas and procedures that the colleges should try to pursue in order to do a better job at their remedial work. From a statistical point of view, that's very, very interesting. There was an individual who responded to, I think it was the Education Week article.
Right.
And it was someone who herself had grown up in I think it was South Carolina, in a poor neighborhood. Can't tell by the name whether she's a minority or not. She may or may not be. But she was saying, if you really study the bell curve, which is a statistical way of analyzing things, never in American history have we had more than 75% that would be graduating on the average with this bell curve. And so her rhetorical question was, well, what are we beating our heads about, and our whole structure to improve this? Well, I do believe we have an answer. I think we do have to improve it because we know that in the affluent, predominantly white communities, these graduation rates are 95, 96, 97, 98%. And therefore, if she were minority, I would think she would still be wanting to reach for, what should we say, reach for the stars. Right. What is your hope? What is your dream? Another interesting factor, because I was at this board meeting last night, there were several students who made a presentation on behalf of Teach for America teachers, right, who are the Board of Education has had a contract with Teach for America for
a while,
for at least 7 or 8 years.
Right.
You know, but there has been this movement suggesting that the Board of Education is spending too much money.
Right.
It's $650,000 a year to employ these Teach for America teachers. And yet there were at least a dozen students last night who came and said, we've even, some of us have decided to go into teaching because of this Teach for America teacher that was teaching us. You know, I mean, they're live, one after the other, after the Black, Hispanic, and there may have been, I think it was mostly Black and Hispanic students who were there. There may have been a white student, I don't recall. But anyway, they were all saying, these teachers made a difference to me because of how they taught us and so forth. Now, that was not to denigrate the other first-year and second-year teachers who were in there, because the same kinds of results might have happened.
The crazy part about this, and we're going to wind this up, is, and I'm going to leave you with this, is that Hartford, by themselves, hired too many consultants.
Oh, yeah.
And that figure is phenomenal.
Yeah.
So the money really doesn't go into education. It will go into actually people that is actually consultants, and that's well over $100,000 a year.
Yeah, I think with this particular program, it does go to the Teach for America program, which does have a whole series of ongoing educational and support group meetings for all of their teachers. And the big question was, does Hartford do the same for its other mainline teachers who are first and second year teachers? And that was the big question.
I'm going to stop you on that note. We're out of time. Time flies at Education One. Next week, we have another powerful guest coming up. And believe me, every week is something. We look at facts and statistics. We look at the overall facets of actually education. We're trying to look at the depth and the breadth of actually how this thing really works. Can it work? Can it work in the Hartford region? Can it work in Connecticut? Can we get our kids where we have to be? As I say every Tuesday, if it's Tuesday, it's Education One. I see you on the internet. God bless. Thank you for viewing in. Mr. Dale.
At Hartford Public Schools, we care about one thing above all, the future of our kids. That's why we're dedicated to providing all students with the knowledge and skills needed in the new global culture. Hartford Public Schools is thriving. More student success stories, more world-class facilities, more university and corporate partnerships, more amazing talent coming and staying in Hartford. This is how education is supposed to work. Welcome to Hartford Public Schools, where the future is present.